Hello everyone and welcome to an amazing game that took place some 2 weeks ago in the qualifications for the FIDE Women's Grand Prix. It is Greek number 1 Stavroula Tsolakidou versus German number 1 Elisabeth Paehtz. We've featured both of them on the channel. Stavroula is a 3-time world champion. She was a world champion for women under 14, I believe under 16 and under 18. And Elisabeth is a 2-time world champion for women under 18 and women under 20, I believe. Also a published author, commentator, and she's the first woman from Germany to acquire the title of Grandmaster. So it's a pretty strong matchup, and it's a really strong and complicated game, which makes me think, shame on you for not recommending this game. I stumbled upon it by accident. I was actually looking for another game. There was this dispute on Twitter that a certain player will not be getting the sort of brilliancy prize or the beauty prize due to being from a certain country, and then I wanted to check out the game. Was it really brilliancy prize deserving or not? But I, being clumsy as I am, I went to a different tournament and then I checked out some of the games, and that's how I found this game. So it's really sad that you guys haven't recommended it. But yeah, let's check it out. Stavroula has the white pieces and she opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to c5. Elisabeth goes for the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. My favorite, of course, is pawn to b4 here, but okay, maybe not for a classical game, even though I have played it in classical with success. But okay, bishop b5. This is the Nimzovich-Rossolimo. We already mentioned it's a little bit different than when black goes d6 instead of knight to c6. That's the canal or the Sokolsky attack. Bishop to b5, we have pawn to g6 and castles kingside. Bishop to g7, we have rook to e1 and pawn to e5. So all been seen before, nothing new here. Bishop captures on c6 and now d captures on c6. Usually when you're teaching someone chess, you will tell them always capture towards the center, not away from the center. But here it is done specifically to control the d4 square. If you capture towards the center here, then you allow white to go for the immediate d4, something like knight e7, and d4 can happen. Let's say captures, and captures, which would not be possible if the queen was also controlling the d4 square. So by playing d captures and c6, yes, you capture away from the center, but you also gain nice control over d4, and the white will have to look for a different way to develop. Usually d3 is played here, which makes perfect sense. But here we have pawn to a4, a move that has been played on the top level. It's frequently played by Gawain Jones, for example. But also there is a very famous game where Fabiano Caruana defeated Magnus Carlsen with this pawn to a4 move, and we will follow that game for a few moves. Queen to e7, knight to a3, and here Magnus in that game against Fabiano Caruana in 2023 played bishop to e6, and Magnus lost that game. But here we have knight to h6 by Elisabeth. It is one of the engine's top recommendations, the other one being pawn to f6, but both moves will be played, so maybe it's not even relevant in which order you play them. So knight to h6, and now pawn to d3. Or you could stop maybe the knight from coming to g4 by playing pawn to h3. Maybe it makes sense, also limiting the bishop, but still you would play f6, get the knight to f7, and then control the center nicely. You control d6, e5, g5, and so on. So here we have pawn to d3 and now pawn to f6, and there are a couple of games where a5 was played, but here we have knight to c4, and it is now as of move 10 that we have a completely new game. So let's see what happens. We have bishop to e6, putting pressure on the knight, and the immediate pawn to a5, allowing bishop captures on c4. But even though you can do this, you don't really gain all that much. If you play, for example, bishop captures, you can capture on h6, a nice Zwischenzug, and after bishop captures, d captures on c4. Yes, there's rook to d8. It looks a bit of like a bit of a problem for white, but you can play queen e2 and you don't have to worry. There's a knight on f3, so it's perfectly fine. Next you can play rook d1, challenge the rook, and so on. I mean, you can play it. It's fine for both white and black. And another thing, they're playing extremely fast. Even though this is an incredibly rare line, both of them are playing basically spent 5 minutes to get here, and this is round 1. So here we have castles kingside, bishop to e3, and now knight to g4, as the move hasn't been prevented by pawn to h3. Stavroula goes back, bishop to d2, and now knight back to h6. We have pawn to b3 and rook f to d8. Okay, nicely aligning the rook with the white queen. So queen to c1, now putting pressure on the knight on h6, and the knight comes to f7. We have bishop to e3, putting pressure on the c5 pawn. Maybe you can pressure it further with queen to a3. Rook to d7 and queen to a3, threatening bishop captures on c5, so bishop to f8. Bit of a passive move, but, you know, black has nothing to worry about here. This is perfectly fine. Knight f to d2. Making room for the f pawn to be pushed forward. Also, maybe this knight can somehow come to a4 to put more pressure on c5. All depends on what Elisabeth plays. She goes rook to b8, prepares pawn to b5, pawn to f4, and now a counter on the queen side, pawn to b5. We have captures en passant, a captures on b6, and f captures on e5. We have f captures and queen to a6, utilizing that open a file, threatening knight captures on b6. If you eliminate that pawn, then this pawn will fall quickly, and black's position falls apart. So Elisabeth has to defend it. There's a direct way of defending it. You could just bring the other rook to help out, or you could try something like pawn to b5. It's a very tricky idea where you allow knight a5 to go after the c6 pawn, and then you play queen e8. I mean, not something that you think of right away, because after knight captures on c6, there's rook d6, and even if you see all of this, you can still give up the queen for two rooks, like captures, captures, and captures, and it is, okay, it's, we could say equal, but if anyone will be playing for a win here, it is definitely white. So after queen a6, there's that, and there's also just defending the pawn. So rook d to b7, defending on b6, and now knight to f3. We have bishop to d7, and rook to f1. Pawn to b5, finally it's played, and now Stavroula goes back, knight c to d2. The problem with knight to a5 is that, okay, you attack the rook, but after the rook moves, what are you doing about bishop to c8? This is going to be a big problem for white. So after b5, knight c to d2, and now queen to d6, activating the queen, also adding more defenders here to c6 and c5, bishop to f2, and now bishop to e6. We have king to h1 and rook back to d7. Queen to a5, and now comes rook d to d8. We have bishop to h4, now putting pressure on that rook, and rook to e8. We have knight to g5, and now, okay, it looks dangerous, but you can just trade knights, so nothing really happening here. Knight captures, bishop captures, and now bishop to e7, offering a trade of bishops. Interesting here would be pawn to c4, but, you know, maybe something like b captures queen to c5, and that black queen really gets activated. You can even give up a pawn here, and okay, now you have the c file to work with, and maybe this is the least painful way to play. But after bishop to e7, we have bishop back to e3 again. Stavroula declines the trade of bishops. We have rook to f8, and a trade happens. Rook captures, we have rook captures on f8, and queen to c3 now. Again, putting pressure on that e5 pawn. And while objectively it is a draw, like all positions are, but maybe it's a little bit easier for white to play, due to control of the open A file. Also, black has 3 pawn islands, white has 2 pawn islands, and Elisabeth does have the bishop pair, so if she can fully activate them, should be very nice. We have rook to e8, also setting up sort of a defense towards that e5 pawn, because it can easily be attacked. The knight can come to f3, the bishop can come to g3, so that pawn could easily fall. We have rook back to f1, now that the f file also opened up. Rook to a8, basically trading open files. We have h3, and now rook to a2, nicely activating and sort of limiting the mobility of the white queen, as she's now stuck guarding that c2 pawn. Stavroula goes knight to f3 and pawn to b4, pushing the queen away from the defense of the c2 pawn, trading e pawn for the c pawn, and this is where the game really blows up. We have queen captures on e5, and now I'm not going to tell you what move should have been played here, even though regardless of what move is played, white is definitely ahead here, and white is the one playing for the win. Elisabeth played rook captures on c2, and there is something very, very wrong with this move, but only if you find Stavroula's next move. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the only move that wins the game for white, while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this brilliant maneuver. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is bishop to h6. Beautiful. If you find something like queen to a1 or rook to a1, those are all fine moves, but they don't end the game on the spot. Bishop to h6 ends the game on the spot, and there's no good way of defending that. That's why pawn to h6 was best instead of this rook captures on c2 move, simply because it gives the h7 square to the black king. But here, after bishop to h6, the complications that arise are just breathtaking. Look at this. If, okay, obviously, we know what happens if you trade queens, and a queen trade occurred in the game. But let's say bishop to f8 is played. Where is really the problem here? The problem here is this knight to e1 move, which attacks the rook that is now conveniently on c2 and also puts more pressure on the bishop on f8. So, of course, if you capture the white queen, rook captures on f8 is checkmate. And even if you don't capture the white queen, rook captures on f8 will force black to give up the queen, and then you're going to get checkmated just as easily. So there is one defensive idea, and that is bishop to f7, which sort of disconnects the rook from the f8 square. However, it loses to rook captures on f7. Again, you're threatening captures with checkmate, so the queen cannot be captured. And once the king captures, now you just trade queens and you conveniently pick up the rook on c2. You're up a full piece and, of course, completely winning. So bishop h6 is what they call a killer move. And now queen captures on e5 was played, which is the top move recommended by the engine, but it does not help you all that much. But again, it's not easy to see why. Look at this. Knight captures on e5, and we have king to h8, freeing up the g8 square for the bishop so you don't get checkmated. But now knight captures on c6. And if you're thinking, well, isn't this, a bit of a too complicated a position to just go grabbing a pawn? But I mean, it's a double c pawn. Why are you capturing a pawn? The thing is, it's not capturing a pawn. It's taking away this important diagonal from the dark square bishop. And now the point is, if you play bishop to d6, you cannot go to f8. That would just be, rook captures on f8. Here, e5 forces the bishop away from this diagonal, bishop to c7, and now finally rook to f8 check, bishop to g8, and knight e7 will checkmate the black king. There's nothing you can do. If you could play check followed by captures, that'd be great, but the bishop is also covering the c1 square. I know you guys forgot about our good friend the bishop on h6, but yeah, there's that. So after knight captures on c6, bishop to h4 was played, but now, although you can finish the game many different ways, pawn to g3 was played, and it was in this position on move 42 that Elisabeth Paehtz resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So what a game to start the tournament with. Like I said, this was played in round 1, and this is how you want all of your round 1 games to look like. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. If you win spectacularly, and then you try to do the same for the rest of the tournament. If not, okay, maybe you pick up later. But yeah, the bishop is attacked, and there's really nothing to do. You can give up the bishop here, you can give up the bishop here, you can give up the bishop here, or you can capture on g3, and then the same thing happens as we've discussed. Rook to f8 with check, only move bishop to g8, then comes knight e7, and the only way to stop the immediate checkmate is to play some moves that really make no sense, like rook h2, king g1, and that's it. Now you have to play some silly moves, or you just allow white to checkmate you. You play something, and then rook captures on g8 will be checkmate. So yeah, brilliant stuff. After pawn to g3, Elisabeth resigned, and another spectacular game by Greek number 1, Stavroula Tsolakidou. We've covered, I believe, maybe even 5 of her games, maybe even more. I've lost count really, but if you want to see some other games, and all of them are featuring pretty much moves either as good as bishop to h6 or even better. So if you're interested, I will put a list of her games in the description below. Feel free to check them out as well. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and shame on you for not recommending it to me, and also shame on me if you guys recommended it and I've somehow missed it. I would like to thank Christopher Medema, Elias Wilhelm, Peter Van Dost, Derek King, and Charles Benjamin Flynn for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, such as this one, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.